there, everyone. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. The NFL wrapped up its owners' meeting today, and this was the big meeting of the NFL's owners. The NFL has a number of other meetings throughout the year with them, but this was the big one. This was the one where the media were present, where we got to hear from Eagles chairman and CEO Jeffrey Lurie, and we got to hear about the various rules changes that are going to be in effect for the upcoming season. Now, we'll touch on all of the big rules changes that are going to be occurring and the things that people need to know as we move into the 2025 season. But we're going to start with the hot topic of the meeting, the one that drew the most media attention, the one that drew the most attention from fans, and the one that keeps resurfacing and has been resurfacing over the last couple of years, but there was a serious attempt this year, and that was the proposal by Green Bay Packers president Mark Murphy to effectively ban the brotherly shove, or the tush push, whatever play you want to call it. The Green Bay Packers put a proposal forward that they wanted that play cut out. And ultimately, that discussion, that conversation that was occurring at the meeting, resulted in that proposal being tabled until one of the future meetings. Most likely, it sounds like it would be the spring meeting that's going to occur at the end of May. Now, every time this particular play comes up in the conversation about whether or not it should be allowed, there's always some sort of outcry, oh, this is a football move, or this is not a football move. There were all kinds of conversations that were going on in the lead up to this. The coaches, especially coaches that were close to the Philadelphia Eagles over the years, Nick Sirianni basically outright said that he was holding Shane Steichen's, Jonathan Gannon's, Kellen Moore's feet to the fire, saying that they got to their respective head coaching positions because of this play, so they better not ban it. The bottom line is that it is a football move, and even if you want to make the argument that it's a rugby move, it doesn't matter because football kind of evolved from rugby in a certain sense. The other argument, and the argument that was put forward by the Green Bay Packers when they submitted the proposal for consideration, was player safety. Packers president Mark Murphy said that he was having conversations with the NFL's chief medical officer, Alan Sills, about this particular play.
I was really moved by Alan Sills, the chief medical officer. He felt very strongly that it was just a question of when there'd be a catastrophic injury with this. So, that was it. And then, pace of play was the other thing. And I, maybe it's because I'm not a former commander, I'm a former Redskin, but the NFC Championship game was, players jumping over the line, and I don't think it was it's good for the game.
Now, I don't know about you, but the only players that I've seen getting injured on the brotherly shove are the ones who are not doing it right. Either they're lining up incorrectly, or they don't have the player personnel to support the play, or they're going to be like Washington and just leap over the offensive line to try to stop this in a much, much, much more unsafe manner than whatever the Eagles are doing with the brotherly shove. I haven't seen any Eagles players get injured due to this play when executed well, when executed to perfection, as the Eagles have been executing this play to perfection. The Eagles have put in time mastering this play. I haven't seen any of that occur. I haven't seen any Eagles players get injured. And when you hear Jeffrey Lurie talk about it, he himself is alluding to the fact that the medical data doesn't exist.
Well, the tush push, they probably will be discussing it in May, so we have to be prepared for every result. I think for everybody, including myself especially, health and safety is the most important thing when evaluating any play. We've been very open to whatever data exists on the tush push, and there's just been no data that shows that it isn't a very, very safe play. If it weren't, we wouldn't be pushing the tush push. If you want to say that it could be, it's hard to make rules on could be's and should be's. The quarterback sneak is one of the reasons we like using the tush push is we think it's a safer play than the quarterback sneak. The quarterback sneak, if you talk to quarterbacks about it, there's more spearing going on. They're less protected by players around them. And one of the reasons we got motivated to develop an expertise in this play is it was more protective to the quarterback. And so it's ironic that, people would bring up health and safety. We're at the top of the game in terms of wanting health and safety on every play. We voted for hip drop tackle and defenseless receiver. We will always, always support what is safer for the players. It's a no-brainer. If this is proven to be less safe for the players, we will be against the tush push. But until that's the case, to me, there'd be no reason to ban this play.
And even Mark Murphy admitted that in the presentations that Alan Sills was giving to the league's owners, there isn't sufficient data to support the idea that players are more or less likely to be injured by this play.
In terms of safety, there haven't been that many plays, so there wasn't a lot of injury data, but it was a very small sample size.
Whether it's due to a small sample size or whatever, there's insufficient data to support this conclusion. So we have to throw the player safety argument out the window, because the Eagles themselves admitted that if there was in fact a legitimate player safety concern, the Philadelphia Eagles would come down in direct opposition to this play. They would probably stop using it themselves, and they would say, you know what, this is probably not a good idea. We'll get on board in supporting a ban for this. But you really can't make that argument because the data doesn't exist. Now, I respect the Green Bay Packers as a franchise, and I respect their fan base. They have a long and storied history. Obviously, their most storied coach, Vince Lombardi, the trophy that the Super Bowl champion wins every year bears his name. Vince Lombardi has only ever lost one postseason game in his entire career. That was to the Philadelphia Eagles in 1960 in the NFL championship game. They have a personal affection in my heart as well, because those of you who know how this channel has gotten started probably know about friend of the show and Green Bay Packers content creator Tom Grossi. Tom was sort of the inspiration for this channel getting started, and it's certainly appreciated, and the support that I have received from that community has been well respected and much appreciated. But as much as I respect the Packers as a franchise and their fan base, as an Eagles fan, it is difficult for me to look at this and see anything other than a salty team president. We can't call him an owner because the Packers are the only publicly owned franchise in the league. A salty team president who's bitter about the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles swept his team, defeating them twice, once in the first ever game in Brazil, which, according to Tom, when I spoke to him over the summer, was going to be a Packers home game for everybody, and then rematched against them in the wild card round, swept them out of the playoffs as the Eagles went on to win their second Super Bowl. And somebody who's bitter about the fact that the Eagles have now won 4 of their last 5 matchups against the Green Bay Packers and have beaten the Green Bay Packers 3 times in their 4 postseason matchups. At a certain point, you can't get past that fact. Now, we're going to see whether or not this is really something that the Packers are serious in proposing when the spring meeting comes around in May, and then certainly after Mark Murphy retires from his role as Packers president in July. But the way that I look at this, I'm going to borrow from Tom Grossi who has said this multiple times on his own channel. If you do not like this play, if you want the Philadelphia Eagles to stop using the tush push, the brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it, a play that the Eagles have mastered, a play that Jeffrey Lurie himself has said that they believe is safer than the quarterback sneak. If you want the Philadelphia Eagles to stop using that play, you, as a team, and your defensive unit have to come up with a way to stop it. If you don't like it, find a way to stop it. Because the NFL is a copycat league, that will be the easiest way to stop the proliferation of this play, to stop the Eagles from continuing to use this, is for the opposing defenses to become that much better at controlling the line of scrimmage that the Eagles can't push and shove their way to a first down. So for now, let's move on to the other changes that are occurring. And those other changes, there were a couple that were done outside of the normal rules change process. The first was a change to how the NFL approaches uniforming, in particular that teams are now allowed to wear alternate or throwback uniforms, which would include the Philadelphia Eagles Kelly green uniforms, 4 times in the course of the year. Now, when you consider the fact that a team hosts no more than 8 or 9 home games in the course of a regular season, this does in fact matter. And this is a great opportunity for fans to see their team in maybe a uniform that they might like better. Eagles fans have really heavily adopted the Kelly green, and since bringing them back a couple of seasons ago, the Philadelphia Eagles are undefeated in the Kelly green uniforms. So I am a big fan of this change. I do like seeing the Kelly green. I like it as an alternate jersey. I'm not a fan of it as the primary color, simply because midnight green is a jersey that we have won 2 Super Bowls in. So I'm a big fan of the midnight green as well. It's the color of my childhood. But I respect the history that's in the Kelly green, and I think that this is an opportunity for fans to see their team more often in a color that they might like. So, big fan of this change and this flexibility. The other change that occurred impacts how the game is administered. And this was something that was done outside of the normal rules change process. The NFL announced on Wednesday that it is now going to be using Sony's Hawkeye technology to help administer first downs, utilizing the chain gang, the customary chain gang where they're holding 2 sticks 10 yards apart that are bound together by a chain. That's where the chain gang gets its name, as the secondary measure. So what is the Hawkeye technology? Well, according to the NFL, it consists of 6 8K cameras for optical tracking of positioning of the game ball. It's operated out of New York, out of the Art McNally Game Day Central Officiating Center. That's where all replay reviews are reviewed and adjudicated for every NFL game. It's also, according to the NFL, going to allow for virtual recreations of measurements that will be produced in real time for the in-stadium and broadcast audience. Now, the in-stadium audience, definitely I understand that, and certainly the broadcast audience as well. Remember that the yellow line that is portrayed on the television broadcasts is an unofficial line. The Hawkeye technology is going to showcase the official measurements, and it's going to showcase them in a way that's going to allow for fans to see that the ball did in fact reach the line to gain. Now, Sony's Hawkeye technology is not new to the scene per se. Sony has been partnering with 23 of the top 25 global sports leagues to bring this technology to their games, to their matches. We've seen it in tennis Grand Slams. We've seen it in soccer matches. We've seen it in the Rugby World Cup. It's been something that's been present throughout the sporting world. And to now see it being implemented in this way, I think is something that fans will appreciate. It's kind of like the robo-ump for balls and strikes. This is one of the things that I think if we start to see now a more fair, a more accurate, a consistently called game, especially as it relates to the first down marker, that's going to be something that's going to be really helpful for fans to grow in that game, taking a lot of the judgment call out of it and applying a consistent standard for this. So I'm a fan of rolling out Hawkeye. It's going to be sad to see measurements not be performed by the chain gang. Having worked a couple of chain gangs, not at the NFL level, but at other levels, it's always fun to run out there and to be part of that. But I can also see why this technology needs to exist and why this technology should be utilized for that. So I certainly welcome the advent of the Hawkeye technology in the NFL. And that brings us to the rules changes. The first one is the dynamic kickoff, which we saw last season on a trial basis. That trial has been made permanent. They did make one change to it, and that is that if you do something like have the ball sail through the back of the end zone, which happened a fair bit over the course of the 2024 season. For the 2024 season, the touchback was at the 30-yard line if it sailed through the back of the end zone without touching the landing zone at all. The landing zone is the 20-yard line to the goal line. If it sailed through the back of the end zone without landing in that landing zone, the touchback line was the 30. The NFL wanted to try to encourage more kickoff returns, so they're making the change to make that touchback line, if that kickoff sails through the back of the end zone, the touchback line is now going to be at the 35. So at the receiving team's own 35-yard line is where they will start with that possession. So it's kind of incentivizing kickers to try to make sure that that ball lands in the 20-yard line, because if it lands in the 20-yard line, the receiving team has to try to return it. Additionally, a rules change that Jeffrey Lurie put forward was implemented. The Eagles put forward a proposal that will align the postseason and the regular season overtime rules. So in the regular season through 2024, it was one 10-minute overtime period. Both teams would have the opportunity to possess the football unless the first team to possess the football scored a touchdown or there was a defensive score on that first drive following the opening kickoff. However, in the postseason, both teams had the opportunity to possess the football regardless of what score occurred, unless, again, there was a defensive score. So regardless of whatever the offense did on the opening drive, unless there was a defensive score on that opening drive, both teams would have an opportunity to possess the football. In 2025, those rules are going to be aligned so that regular season overtime is going to look like postseason overtime. Both teams will have the opportunity to possess the football unless there's a defensive score. The only difference between the two of them, in the postseason, it's a 15-minute overtime period and it can keep going for as long as necessary. In the regular season, it is one singular 10-minute overtime period, so games can still end in a tie, Donovan McNabb. The NFL's competition committee also advanced a proposal to expand the replay assist functionality. So now replay assist can assist in more situations. Unnecessary roughness in particular has a couple of expansions. Unnecessary roughness used to be able to utilize replay assist only under forcibly contacting a runner when he is out of bounds, and there's clear and obvious video evidence that the runner was not in fact out of bounds. It has now been expanded to allow for the unnecessary roughness flag to be picked up if it's thrown because unnecessary roughness was called due to forcibly hitting a defenseless player's head or neck area, and there's clear or obvious video evidence that that contact did not exist. We saw that a little bit with the Kansas City Chiefs when they were playing in the postseason this past postseason. There were some questionable unnecessary roughness calls made against the Houston Texans for a phantom hit in the head neck area on Patrick Mahomes. So replay assist is now going to be able to step in and say, no, that was not, in fact, unnecessary roughness when he's sliding. Replay assist will also be able to support the picking up of flags when there's clear and obvious evidence that any of the following fouls didn't exist: face mask, horse collar tackles, tripping, or roughing or running into the kicker. It also allows for the replay official to support the rest of the officiating crew as it relates to correct application of the playing rules, advising, consulting, assisting them as they're making those decisions. So there's definitely a little bit of expansion when it comes to the use of replay assist to support game administration, as well as things like timing or pass direction. There's a number of things that are factored in. The league also approved a couple of changes to the NFL's bylaws when it comes to roster-related transactions, allows teams to designate 2 players for return at the 53-man roster cutoff, and allows teams to designate 10 injured reserve players for return. The big change that occurred for some of the administrative stuff was the fact that the NFL is going to be allowing for a slight expansion for 2025 and the 2026 free agency period. There's going to be a slight expansion of what permissible contact is going to look like in the 2 days leading up to the start of the NFL's year for 2026. Under a proposal from the Pittsburgh Steelers that was approved, teams will be allowed to, in addition to talking with agents as it relates to terms, they'll be allowed to have one phone call with the player directly for the purposes of setting up travel arrangements for the player to sign a contract once the contract goes into effect. There's also a rules change that's being implemented that's going to allow for teams to be able to prepare the footballs that are used for kicking, commonly called K-balls. Prior to this season, teams provide the footballs for their respective offensive drives. However, the kicking balls prior to this season had to be new, unopened footballs from Wilson. So the NFL this year is allowing teams to prepare their kicking footballs. So now the teams provide the footballs, and those footballs no longer have to be unopened. They still have to meet other regulatory requirements in the NFL's rules, but they don't have to be the unopened footballs anymore. The final rule change put forward by the Washington Commanders allows teams that may qualify for the postseason to get scouting credentials for weeks 17 and 18, which prior to this was not permitted. Teams that could qualify for the postseason now have the ability to request scouting credentials, so that way they can watch the game, they can watch the players, they can kind of scout out the potential postseason opponents to be able to report back to their home team. That's something that goes on. It's actually something that is encouraged. And while those scouts can't take their own video or can't do any of that nonsense, this is something that is supported by the NFL and understood that it's going to happen. So there are rules surrounding how it happens. This rule change allows for scouts to be able to visit potential postseason opponents. Similarly, any club hosting a wildcard game has to provide scouting credentials to all teams in the same conference who are participating in the postseason. And with that, that kind of closes the book on the 2025 NFL annual meeting. Obviously, there's still a lot to keep your eyes out for, so definitely keep tuned in here to the Bird's Nest podcast as rules changes occur and as additional news breaks out of the NFL's other owners' meetings over the course of the year. We'll bring that to you. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your thoughts about the brotherly shove once again escaping the ban from the NFL? What are your thoughts about the other rules changes that the NFL has implemented? Let me know. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning into the Bird's Nest podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, and iHeartRadio. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles and NFL coverage. And if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. And let's go, Eagles.